Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final Artemis Fowl read-along discussion, where we are discussing the 8th and final book in the series, The Last Guardian. So, you can... Oh my God, I did not mute myself on the other tab. That's
I just did that because I always...
I heard my voice and I thought it was one of you guys talking, and I was like, when did you guys start sounding like me? So I don't know if you want to wait for a few minutes for people to come, or we can get started on the discussion.
I think waiting sounds good. That's what we've been doing, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a while for people to sort of trickle in.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm trying to set it up so I can actually see the live chat in the other tab.
Same.
I don't know why I struggle with this every time. Like, it's the same way every time we do it, but...
Yeah.
Cute thumbnail, by the way. I saw that when it got, like, when you scheduled it, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, this looks so nice.
I love it.
You. I am so bad at graphic design. I spent like 2 hours on Canva, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, it looks great. I thought it was really good.
Thank you. I really wanted to do like something special for the last one.
Yeah.
Christopher, I want him to bring me my nail clippers.
Somebody's multitasking.
It's just like, you know, when you just have like one rough nail and you know you're gonna like bite at it and pick at it until you can like cut it, and that's gonna happen. And I don't want to like chew my whole fingernail off.
Good idea.
But I don't know if he's watching this or if he's not, because he didn't read the book. This morning I was like, okay, here's the plan. I have to read all of Artemis Fowl 8. And he was like, oh, that's today. Whoops. I was like, thanks, babe. But I did. I read it all. I didn't not finish it like last time.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings.
I feel like I only really like processed and understood about like maybe 10% of the book, so I don't even think I feel like I know what happened in this book.
Well, then this will be a surprise for you.
I actually think it will, though.
To be fair, part of the book I felt made no sense, but I was just like, I'm here for the ride.
Yeah,
Also, it makes sense for anything involving Opal to just make no sense.
Just be like completely bonkers. Yeah, I know. Just when you said like I only got 10% of it, my first thought was like, well, really only 10% of it made sense. So like,
only 10% of it matters.
Yeah, it was a lot.
A lot with a capital L.
So I guess we can go ahead and get started since it's been about 5 minutes since we've gone live. So I would really like to start off with everyone's overall thoughts on the 8th book and your rating. So does anyone want to go first?
I can go first. Well then. I like I said, I feel like I didn't like catch a lot of what was happening. It was just like a lot, and since I haven't like read this book before, I feel like that helped with the other ones because I didn't have to devote like 100% of my brain power to it. So like I feel like I didn't catch as much this time, and I think that is like due to like me not knowing the story of what was going to happen except for the end. I definitely read the end and I was like, what? But now I don't know, like I just like never was engaged, never really cared. It just seemed to be like a lot and trying to do a lot, and overall I feel very like underwhelmed, and I feel like that could be my experience with the last 4 books in this series, though, is just like underwhelmed. Overall, I would say my rating is probably like 2 stars. I didn't hate it, but I never cared. which is like, especially since like it's spent the last however much, like spent the last 8 or 7 books in the series like building up to this. Like, it just didn't feel like the most strong ending or the most like impactful ending, unfortunately. So yeah. I'm done.
Cara, would you like to go?
Sure. So it's funny because I gave it the same rating Giselle did. I also have it at a 2 stars right now, but overall I feel a little more positive about it. Like, so it might be around like a 2.5. Because I had to fight my instinct of like, I finished the book and I'm like, this is so sad and messed up. Like, I hated it. But I think overall, I was kind of disappointed with this as a finale because there were some weird like out of character things. I felt like this was the book where like the inconsistencies actually started to bother me. That's never really been something that bothered me before, as we've like discussed a lot. Outside of a couple things, I've been pretty like forgiving because I've enjoyed the books anyway. But this one, it felt more distracting. Like there was that thing about how like suddenly trolls are like not stupid. And I'm like, we've spent books talking about how dumb they are, and now it's like, oh, they're basically monkeys, like really smart monkeys. So stuff like that. I just don't like Miles and Beckett, so that was gonna be a count against this book anyway. Yeah, but even with all of that said, and this is the reason why I might, like, I'm still kind of thinking about my rating, because even with all the things I didn't like about it, and another big thing was, I feel like nobody really reacted to the fact that like a huge number of people on this planet like just died. Like nobody cared. Like so they refer to like planes falling from the sky in like one sentence. And like this would be the biggest loss of human life of all time. And like I understand they're busy, but like I don't know, it just bothered me how that was addressed in the book. But anyway, so like all of those problems aside, like the emotional like punch of this book really got to me. Like I've read this twice before, and it's still like the ending still gutted me. Even though I knew what happened and even though I knew how things would resolve. So like for that reason, I give it more credit because like I think like seeing Artemis's arc, and like we'll probably end up talking about this when we discuss like our thoughts on the series overall, but seeing how far he's come since like book 1 Artemis, who like wouldn't do anything for anyone except himself and maybe 2 people, to him being so selfless, and it felt like such a natural thing for him to do now. Like I just really loved seeing his arc, and there were a couple of really beautiful scenes with like him and Holly and Butler just like kicking ass, and yeah, so like the emotional stuff I think was really good. I just had a lot more problems with some of the plot things. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like my final thought is like this book still kind of makes me mad, but even though it makes me mad, I appreciate how much it hurts me.
I just really like that phrase. There were so many beautiful scenes with Holly Butler kicking ass. Yeah. They were so beautiful.
It was. The emotional stuff too, though, where like Artemis is realizing what he's gonna have to do. Like that was like a beautiful scene that was not ass kicking, but yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I think I liked it more than you guys did, and I feel like part of that is that with audiobooks, you can just kind of like zone out through the stupid and like only pay attention to like the parts that you want to pay attention to. So I think if I had to give it a star rating, it would actually be a 3 or 3.5. First of all, the phrase Butler's bicep was included in the book, so that automatically bumped it up like half a star rating. And then for me, I think the ending is really what got me, and that's probably why I liked it so much, because it felt like this perfect culmination of Artemis's character growth and character development, as well as how strong his relationship with like Holly and Butler, like how that is. And, you know, just the fact that he wanted to make sure that Butler knew it wasn't his fault and that he did not fail in his job. Oh, I know. So sad. And then the action for the most part was good. The inconsistency did get me about the whole, like, trolls were secretly smart and they were like sideshow attractions for a bit. Yeah. I thought that was bizarre because I thought they were basically untamable, and now you find out dwarves used to ride them, and okay, sure. It was bad. And I'm not a huge fan of Miles and Beckett. I don't get them really. And there wasn't enough Julia or Juliet.
Yeah.
For me. So that kind of worked against the book, but overall I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good conclusion. But then again, I also feel like none of the books really picked their stride back up after the first one. So
that's so sad. But honestly, I would have to agree. The first book is the only book I gave 5 stars.
Yeah, same.
Sorry, Cara.
It's fine.
She's over there like
my heart. It's okay.
So I kind of figured we could get into spoilers like pretty quickly because, you know, I feel like everything that we want to talk about is a spoiler at this point.
Yes.
So what did you think of the ending of the book / series and Artemis's overall sacrifice and fate and what happens to him at the end?
Well,
oh, sorry. Do you want to go first?
I just feel like the problem is that like I didn't enjoy the magic in this or the plot or the reasoning or all these different things. Like I guess like Berserker Warriors is cool, but like and ghosts and him being like corporeal, like non-corporeal, like spirit essence and like all this stuff. Like I didn't enjoy any of these things like at all leading up to it. But I think I was just past the point of like caring. Like it didn't make me like frustrated or mad like I feel like it did in the last book, and it just like pushed me past to the point where I didn't care. So like I was just like very like nothing could affect me at that point, which is why I feel like I didn't hate it and I still give it 2 stars. But I think I gave it 2 stars because I just couldn't get myself to care about it. And so I feel like I was like not caring through all of it. So that at the end I was just like, whatever. like I feel like I'm not a good discussion partner for this one because I was just like, I felt like I was like over it the entire book, and I was just like, what is happening? And I really didn't like, I don't know if I expressed it very well last time, but I really didn't enjoy the magic from book 7 that was introduced, like the dark runes and all the stuff. And it's like, how has this like pretty much never been mentioned at all or was a thing in the first 6 books, and now it's like this huge thing all of a sudden with like, apparently all these people use dark runes and she's been using them this whole time, and like all this stuff is just like so much. Like I feel like if this is how he was, which I feel like he didn't plan it, which is the problem, but I feel like if this was like the ending that Owen Colfer was going to be planning towards the entire series, then that stuff that was relevant in it should have been brought forward through the entire series. Like I've said it a million times before again, but I'll say it again. I'm not a very big fan of Harry Potter, but I can really appreciate how much, especially like in the last like 4 books, 3 books of the series, like how she really brought all these different tying things in the last 4 books too. Like how she brought all these different ties in, and even from book 1 and book 2 that there were things, and she built it through the entire series. And I feel like all of this was just dumped in the last 2 books. And it's like, you can't do that with an 8-book series because it makes it feel like you didn't plan anything and like it was lazy. So, okay, sorry.
So you asked about the ending specifically, right, Taylor?
And kind of what happens with Artemis Fowl. Like,
yeah. Okay, so I have very conflicting feelings about it because I already said that like one of the like saving graces of this book for me was Artemis's sacrifice and how much it hurt. Like it makes sense because at the point that he's in this book, it's like, of course he wasn't going to let Holly die for him. And the fact that they both tried and tricked the other to like be the one who would die instead, I'm like, it was very emotional. So I really liked that. Like the part where Artemis actually dies, like where Holly and Butler see him die, like it gets me every time. Like Taylor, you mentioned the part where he tells Butler, like, you need to know this is not your fault. Like you couldn't have done anything. And like when Holly, like she's like, come on, Artemis, like what is your plan? Like you have to have a plan. And he's like, I don't have a plan. And he just like dies right in front of them. I don't want to say I liked it, but it was very good. Like it was very emotional. Kind of like Giselle, I was sort of disconnected from a lot of the plot stuff. And I knew that going in. Like I remembered this book not being my favorite, and I remembered not liking the actual mechanics of the story. I remember being most affected by like the character moments. But the thing that I didn't like about what happened to Artemis is, so his spirit is like apparently hanging around, and they bring the clone of Artemis, and Foley at one point he's like, maybe we should just let it go. And I'm like, what? And Holly yells at him for it. So like they bring the clone, and then they get Artemis's like spirit or soul or consciousness back into the clone. So it's like it's Artemis's mind or personality, but it's like a new body. But then my issue is like, if that's his soul, why doesn't the clone have any of his memories? Like that seemed weird to me. It's like, if you're gonna have him not remember anything, then it kind of feels like Artemis did die. Like this isn't Artemis. It just looks like Artemis. And then I didn't really like the reveal that like Holly's been the narrator, or like she's the one who's been
Did that.
I hate it a lot. And like I was talking to Yvette about this, and she said it was kind of a cool twist, but it didn't really. Oh, I see Yvette and Priscilla are here. Hello. So Yvette and I were talking about that, like, oh, she's been telling the story the whole time. And I think Yvette summed it up pretty well. She's like, kind of a cool twist, but doesn't make sense. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm thinking back to all those times where like things happened where Holly would have no way of knowing what was said or how things happened. Like all the times when the villains were talking to each other. How would Holly know this? So I think like the only way that makes sense to me is if we're not actually supposed to think she was like the narrator of the 8-book series. It's just that she's kind of summarizing their adventures for Artemis. And Owen Colfer was like, what would be really cool if I started out with the line of the first book? Like, I can accept that. I can accept it being a cool move to do that. But if he's trying to say that, like, she's been the omniscient narrator for this whole series, I'm like, I am not buying that. But yeah.
I didn't get that impression that she was the narrator. I didn't get the impression that she was the narrator for the entire thing, personally. So until you said that, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I had the thought that like, wow, it's really weird that she's describing it like this. This doesn't sound like Holly at all. But I didn't have the thought that like she's been the narrator the whole time, because it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
So what I took it as is that Artemis Fowl clone, his memories aren't entirely gone. It's just that they're taking a while to come back, because when he woke up, he was like really shaken and he didn't know who they were. And then the memories started to come back. So I guess it's like Holly's trying to help him remember rather than that memory is just wiped clean, But I really I hate that trope where it's like, oh, this was written by someone in the story the whole time. Or like, oh, this is someone telling a story, especially since the very first book. And I think a couple of the other books make it seem more like they're case files. I'm pretty sure that's the thing in the first book where it was like a police report or case file or something.
That's been with all of them though. They all start with like Dr. Argan's pretty much. It's been him almost every time, his like introduction, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't think that was justified. Yeah.
So, Bookie Charm writes, I didn't buy it. Colfer comes out of nowhere with these plot twists that make no sense and have no precedent in the series. And yeah.
Yep.
I love these books, but that's kind of, he's clearly playing it by ear, because I think he really wants to set up the whole ghosts exist and you can basically cure death with a clone and a ghost. That's something you should set up earlier.
Yeah, and like it was weird because like when I was reading that part this time, I was like, okay, I remember now. That's how they do it, because I remembered the clone thing, and I remembered that like Artemis's spirit was hanging around, but I didn't remember like the explanation or like the non-explanation for it. And this time around, I was like, okay, if there's anyone stubborn enough to keep his soul on Earth through sheer willpower. I'm like, I could buy that it's Artemis. Like, I believe he would do that, like if he decided to. But yeah, the fact that like this whole book, they're just acting like we've known about these like warrior spirits all along, and like suddenly Holly's remembering like the stories of her father like telling her about this like great battle. And I do remember like back a few books ago, like we have heard about this last battle before. So that's not so much what bothered me, but it's like the way that he acts like, oh yeah, this has always been a thing and you just forgot. It's
and like, I don't know, like aren't berserkers like Norse mythology?
Yeah, something like that.
So it's like, what a weird thing to choose.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting concept, but
maybe not the right book or series for it.
Yeah.
And I think also, I think one of the problems with, like Giselle, you were talking about how you don't really like the magic in these last couple books. And I'm also like not a huge fan of the like blood runes or whatever. But I think a big part of the problem is that there was, for a series that's like part sci-fi and part fantasy, there's really not a lot of magic until the last couple books. Like most of it is through technology or like healing magic and the mesmer. And it's like, I think the magic was like so simple and like easily understood for so long that like then when he throws other stuff in, it feels even more half-baked than we would have, because it's like everything else has like very simple rules, you know, like we know there's like 3 abilities that they have, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can do pretty much anything if you have a blood rune.
Yeah. And then like, I don't know, Opal being like, oh, and if she hadn't like gotten that human implant, she could get her magic back. And I was like, what? Since when? Like, this is not, how can you just casually throw that in when that's been a huge like plot point of the entire series, is that at least until book 5 or 6, when they're able to undo that like spell where they can't go into human houses, they fairies lose their magic permanently if they go into houses, and they have to sacrifice that. But she mentions how she like would have been able to regain her powers, and I'm like, what? Like, did you catch that?
Yeah, I do remember something about that. I think I just wrote it off as like Opal has all the magic in this book. So she's like, that little pituitary gland is what got me. Like, it's weird though. Like, I didn't find, this is weird because Opal is like probably my least favorite villain, maybe. But I didn't find her annoying in this book because she kind of wasn't in the book a lot. Like,
no, not
you know?
particularly. I can't even tell you what she did other than kill her past self for reasons. Like, I kind of get why, but I was just like, yeah, that sounds like something Opal would do.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like, of the villains, it does make the most sense for her to be the one that's like trying to get this like universe-breaking magic power, but yeah, I was kind of just over Opal, but
yeah, honestly, I felt really bad for Noble. Like, yes, this soulless thing is basically used as a plot convenience and then dies, and I don't know. I felt really bad for Noble.
Yeah, well, and so I remember like when I read this book when it came out, I figured out what the like twist was going to be. Like when Artemis asks for those 2 objects, I was like, oh, one of them's going to be the clone and one of them's going to be a mask to make the clone look like Holly or like someone else. So I was very proud of myself for like guessing that. But the thing I noticed this time is, yeah, it's like how sad like Nopal's whole like existence is. And also, so Artemis and Holly are like the only people basically who treat her like a person, which I think is nice and is very in character, especially for Holly. But then what I don't like is at the very end, when they see all the berserkers, like spirits, like move on, Nopal's doesn't, because they're like, oh, well, she didn't really have a soul. Like, she was never, like, actually a person. And I'm like, that kind of goes against, like, this whole thing you were trying to set up about, like, her life still matters. And, like, she's still, you know, like, she has, like, very limited like functioning, but she's still like a person. She's a being. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, she died, but it's not like a big deal because she didn't have a soul. And I'm like,
yeah, and Artemis had taught her that trick of like opening, like of like lifting her hand up and stuff. Like, oh, there's a person in there, except for not really.
And then he's just gonna sacrifice her for, I guess, reasons. I mean, I guess it's for the greater good, but also,
yeah. Well, I have to admit, like, I'm always a sucker for that trope where it's like the villain is undone by just like not believing that people matter, you know? Like I kind of like that. So the fact that Opal brought about her own downfall just because she could not conceive of anybody like being willing to do what Artemis did, you know? Or like she didn't believe that her could have any, I don't know, could like move or do anything. Like I kind of like that her own arrogance is what destroyed her. It was very satisfying to me.
yeah. Let's see. I think we covered a little bit of Opal in that she exists in this book. Oh, I will say, I kind of, and maybe this is just because I really don't like Opal and the fact that she is quite literally a monster. When Holly was like not down with baby Opal or like past Opal getting killed, I don't know, maybe it was me. I was like, no, get rid of her. I would have undone all of that. I don't know. I would have destroyed the world because I'm like, no, take the shot. I hate this woman.
You're like, do it.
Do it, you cowards.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the same thing. It's like, I don't know. At some point, it's just like you've let her live all these other times and she's killed so many people and ruined so many things. Like, at what point do you finally say enough is enough? This person needs to die. Like,
yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I can see Holly being against it because she's pretty consistently been against killing anybody. But Artemis, like, he's obviously like a good guy by this point, but he's still kind of got that like that willingness to sacrifice people for the greater good that Holly doesn't always have. So it was weird to me that Artemis was like, oh, like somebody's going to lose their life. It doesn't matter what she's done. And I'm like, you were ready to kill her in book 6 because she got your mom sick. You were ready to bury her.
Yeah, and considering the fact that he killed Julius Root, Holly's mentor, like I am totally down with the idea that she would be like, oh no, that's a person. But I feel like maybe there should be a little bit of, she should hesitate a little.
Yeah.
Contemplate that just a little bit.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Holly and Artemis's relationship in this book?
I like it a lot. Like seeing how much they depend on each other. Like I feel like they really like embody the like fire forged friends kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Taylor, if this is like something you wanted to discuss, so feel free to like cut me off. But the like translation of the code in this book is like Artemis's will that we see him writing, but we don't see what it is. So if you look up like the translation for that, he like leaves Holly all of the gold that was the ransom that he held her for, and he's still apologizing. And
yeah,
I don't know, just like a lot of their interactions were like very, I thought they were very well done. And I think part of that is because I knew what was coming. Like I knew that Artemis was going to sacrifice himself so that Holly wouldn't go in his place and everything. So I think that made it even more intense. But I just really like how much they depend on each other, how much they mean to each other. The fact that Artemis actually refers to her as his best friend. And I'm not sure that has ever happened before. Like, I have a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah, I do like how it was mostly platonic in this one. Like, I could get the little bits that Artemis has like a crush on her, but I really don't mind the idea that Artemis would have a crush on her. It's the Holly reciprocating thing that I have like an issue with. But for the most part, it seemed pretty platonic, which I really do like because I think they make a really good team and their friendship is so strong. And I really like how they are willing to dive to keep the other one alive. And that is that is my thing.
Yes. Yep.
I just feel like there was a lot of like residual stuff from the last two books though that just made me like not love their relationship all the way. Like it was just still like I just like wish that stuff hadn't been there at all, and then I could have like felt a lot better about everything in this book. So like because I feel like there was still some of that like weird like what are you doing? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it kind of makes sense that there would be some of that kind of lingering, especially after like where the last book left off. I guess it didn't bother me because like Taylor said, I feel kind of the same where it makes sense for him to have kind of like these lingering, like, are they romantic, possibly, feelings, or at least like attraction or like somewhat of romantic feelings for her. But like for this book, I mainly just saw it as like, whatever you categorize their relationship as, like they mean a lot to each other. And like, that's what I enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's more about the age thing that gets me. I'm sure if Artemis and Holly were like the same age, I could maybe get more with the idea of them having romantic feelings for each other. But the fact that Holly is so much older than Artemis, and the fact that I always imagined her to be at least my age, which is like early 20s, it really grossed me out, the idea that she would return those feelings. Artemis having a crush on her, I feel, is like having a crush on like a guy having a crush on his friend's older sibling, or like a teacher, like harmless, nothing's gonna come of it, hopefully, but yeah, but I really do prefer them as friends. And I see that bookcase said Artemis, Holly, and Butler is the OT3 friendship we deserve. And yes, I really do like their dynamic.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the conclusion between the humans and the fairies? How those worlds sort of, I guess, collide or whatever. Everything's so environmentally friendly now. It's
right. Like this was actually one of the things I had a lot of problems with plot-wise, because I think the problem is like it was worse than I remembered it being, because I remember hating the like whole berserker thing to the point where I read it this time around and I was like, oh, okay, this wasn't as bad as I remembered it being. Like it wasn't as annoying, but I really didn't like how the like catastrophe stuff was handled. Like I mentioned at the very beginning when we were giving our like overall thoughts on the book, there's this one like throwaway line where it's like planes fell from the sky. Like everybody, like 90-something% of the electronics on the planet just explode. Like they mention hospitals, like they mention like all the cars on the highways, like high speed vehicles and everything. And I'm reading all of this and I'm like, this is the like biggest loss of life that has ever happened, I think, in recent history or recorded history even. And I understand why Holly and Artemis and Butler, like they're trying to save the world. They're a little busy, but even the way it was written really bothered me because it almost felt like the book was written in a way where it's like, well, if you guys had just recycled, this wouldn't have happened.
Them's the breaks.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, in a way, I like the fact that now humans and fairies are going to be working together and all that. Like that's nice, but it just like the way that this, like, I guess it's not genocide because it's not like a targeted, extinction of like a particular group of people, but this like mass death is just not treated like it's a big thing. And that left a really bad taste in my mouth. So by the time we got to the end and they're like, people started rebuilding and they were growing food and not processing it. I'm like, that's nice, but like so many people are dead.
Yeah. I really do appreciate what Owen Colfer is going here, and I am all about the whole environmentally friendly message for your book, but sometimes it really is just sort of slapping you in the face with its themes in a way that I don't particularly like, like, oh yeah, all of these people died, but now we're growing our own food and oil is like used only after solar power and wind power, and kumbaya stuff. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is no one going to discuss? Like, you'd think they would mention all of the funerals held for what I assume are at least a couple million people who died.
I know. And like they give us like they might have even given us the statistics of how much human tech was affected, because I know it wasn't as much as the fairies, but it was like some like black market stuff had kind of made their way into the human world. So I get like that maybe it wasn't as catastrophic as, I don't know, they made it sound like the fairy one was, but they made it pretty clear that this was a big disaster. And the whole way it was worded and people's reactions to it were just like,
yeah,
like, well, at least we're friends now. And I'm like, yeah, but probably half the people you know died in a horrible way.
Yeah. I actually kind of want to go back to Artemis Fowl's will just for a quick second, because I do have a little bit of a bone to pick with what he left his mother, which was responsibility over his charities and a department store. I'm sorry. Everything about that will I was down with, but everyone else got like money and stocks and bonds, and the mom gets something for her to run and a department store.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just thought of that for a quick second and I had to
I think it was also supposed to be like, because she likes fashion and stuff, so that was the department store, and like she's very like environmentally conscious and she's big on like animal rights and stuff. So I think it was supposed to be a nice gesture of like, I know this will mean more to you than money, because she's always the one in the family who was like, do we really need to exploit people to make money? But
it's talked about in previous book how she's done a lot for charities and stuff and sponsored a lot of charities and things before. So
yeah,
maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm like, where's my money?
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to read the part that for what he leaves to Holly, because this is the part every time that just like gets me.
Actually, I'm gonna see if I can drop the link in the chat too.
Yeah, I just sent it. I think it went through, but so if you guys haven't read that like bonus content, I put the link there if you want to follow along. But so the part to Holly says, to my friend Captain Holly Short of the Lower Elements Police, I leave the 37 gold bars that were the price of her release when I kidnapped her all those years ago. I know that I can never make up for that crime, but hopefully you can think of me as a friend when you do think of me. I'm like, Artemis, she forgave you like 4 books ago. Like, you're
yeah, no, the whole will, well, most of the will made me like really emotional, and the idea that he is 17 or something, and writing his will.
No.
So I am against the whole curing death or death fake out thing, unless it makes sense. Like in Harry Potter, that was built up over a whole series. And I really don't like the idea of them curing death with the whole cloning ghost soul melding thing. But in this case, I am kind of happy that Artemis isn't dead, just because he's so young. And I started thinking about how he was like 17 and like sacrificing his life and how far he's come. And yeah.
Yeah.
Boy.
I know. I feel the same, where it's like, it can be a hard sell for me sometimes, but in this case, I'm like, I'm really glad he's okay. He came back. But yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if he's going to show up in the Miles and Beckett books. Like, I'm sure he'll have a cameo, but I wonder if he's going to be playing a larger part in that.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Miles and Beckett get their own spinoff.
I'm not going to read that.
I don't think I am either.
Yeah. A part of me is curious, but I don't know. I don't think, because I'm not a fan of them. So
yeah, like so this is actually kind of related to one of the reasons I don't like Beckett and Miles, is it really irritates me when characters, like younger characters or new characters, come in that are basically just like less interesting versions of existing characters. Like Miles only exists to be like a mini Artemis, but with no character like development.
Yeah.
That was another, like, something I didn't really love in this book is how how like it's explained that the reason that the Fowl family has always been fascinated by fairies is this like residual magic or something.
Yeah.
And I remember like hating that when I read this the first time, and I'm still kind of annoyed by it because it's like it makes Artemis like what Artemis did like less impressive because it's like, oh, you were always gonna be what am I trying to say? Like you were always gonna be like set on this path almost. So it's like he doesn't get any credit for being intelligent or creative or anything. It's like, oh well, the dirt was magic, so like
Especially since, like, in book 6, that was also a plot point that was addressed, that it's like, oh, because you had actually gone, like, had traveled back in time and talked to your younger self and, like, introduced fairies to them and then mind wiped them, like, this is the reason why you were still interested in fairies, like, 2 years later and ended up kidnapping Holly. And it's like, they've already explained this, and now they're explaining it again, but a different way. I just, yeah, again, I don't like it. I feel like it takes away from the character.
yeah.
Owen Colfer needs to read his own books before he writes the next one.
Yeah.
I did have a question about Opal really quick. So, since the younger version of her died, how is the older version of her still alive?
Oh,
I think
I was going to ask about that.
I think that it was explained in the last book. Like, you create, like, a separate... It was explained somehow, and I don't remember how, but I think it was something like it had already I don't know.
Okay, because the thing
is why I don't do time travel.
Because Giselle, like you just made me remember something that I was gonna bring up at this discussion because I did not understand how it was possible. But in book 6, like we see young Opal come back to her time. Because do you remember she jumps out of the time stream and her boots are all muddy or something, and she starts yelling at the Brill twins? Like we see her come back. So how is young Opal still stuck in this world when the first book starts? Like, did they explain that and I just missed it? Do you remember the part I'm talking about?
No.
So like in the time
I feel like I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, like in the time paradox, there's there's 2 Opals eventually in like the main timeline. And before we see how Artemis tricks Opal, like flying the plane and all of that jazz, we know there's 2 Opals in the main timeline, and we're seeing in the past that young Opal gets defeated and comes back to her time, which means that now there is 1 Opal per timeline, like it's supposed to be. So then how come when this book starts, there's 2 Opals there again?
And I think they mentioned it in book 7 too, that there was still an Opal at large.
Yeah, but then I'm just thinking of that one scene, like maybe I misinterpreted it, or maybe Owen Colfer forgot he wrote it, but like there's this part where young Opal comes back to her timeline, and I'm like, if that happened, she couldn't have died in the other timeline.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Maybe there are 3 Opals now.
I don't even know. Like this time travel stuff, not my favorite. I got it in book 6 because it was explained very simply.
Yeah, this is why I don't usually like time travel narratives. One of the only time travel narratives I like, and spoilers for Avengers Endgame, but it's Avengers Endgame where they're like, psh, it happens and nothing's going to be affected by it. So
we don't know.
But even in that, also spoilers for Avengers Endgame though, even in that, they like still like bring the stones back, and that's like a really big deal that now that they have like the green stone or whatever, they have to bring it back and give it back to what's her face so that she can have it, so that when that she can give it to Doctor Strange and all this stuff. Like they still like take the gems back in time, just like how Opal can't die because then older Opal will be dead too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, while we're on the subject of inconsistencies, did everyone notice that part that I was talking about before where Holly's like 2 steps above Artemis and she's at eye level?
No. And how
I didn't notice.
And how 17-year-old Artemis is riding on Foley's back, who's a 3.
That I did catch, and I imagine it's just this long, lanky teenager just bouncing on the ground.
But like,
Oh my god,
would be dragging on the ground.
I forgot. Like, I was thinking about it earlier in the book, but by the time we got to the end, I had forgotten he's like Shetland pony sized. Oh my god.
I think he's even smaller than that, though. Like, he's 3 feet tall. Like, that's even smaller than a Shetland pony.
I really don't like the idea of small centaurs. It's creepy for some reason.
Yeah.
There's something just really haunting about it.
Yep.
So Night Fear wrote about our Opal discussion. I think that she is not in her body anymore because she is strong and she keeps her energy together.
Oh.
Wait, what now?
I think that Opal is not in her body anymore, and because she is strong, she keeps her energy together. To be fair, I have no idea how the magic system works, and I honestly, anytime Owen Colfer threw some magic nonsense at me, I was like, sounds stupid, okay.
You're like, fine, I guess. Yeah.
But what point are you talking about? What point is that referring to?
The multiple opals in the timeline. Like, I guess maybe if she wasn't in her body, maybe they brought spirits into it. When I say I do not understand the magic in this book, I do not understand the magic in this book.
I do remember something about, like, when they're talking about after Opal got her, like, cosmic superpowers, like, they kind of described her like she was just, like, this glowing beam of energy, but I thought that was, like, in her body. She was, like, shooting all this energy out, but maybe not. I don't know.
Do you mean in the young Opal, though? Maybe that her energy doesn't leave and they put her back in a clone and puts her back in her time period or something? Is that what you're saying? Because we did see her energy leave and get sucked into, like, the vortex thing, right? With everyone else's, her energy got sucked in and trapped for eternity in the Armageddon pit. I don't know. I feel like the only reason I was able to get through this book was because I was running errands the whole time, so I just turned it on. I'm like, this is forcing me, because if I was home, I would want to be like watching YouTube or doing something else, like not listening to this book, and I have to listen to it, so I'm like, I will run errands and this will force me to listen to it. But then maybe I missed some stuff because not 100% of my brain was on it.
Because you're saying Opal got trapped in the pit, right? Like her...
Yeah, like her spirit when... Like, an Artemis, his soul didn't do that because he was human, but everybody else is like, since they had, like, fairy spirits, they got sucked in.
Right.
And we did see her... That happened to her.
Yeah.
Spirit.
Yeah, we, like, saw her body dissolve or something. I was like, ooh, okay.
This whole conversation makes absolutely no sense to anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, but I feel like it sounds absolutely wild. The fairy spirits and the Armageddon pit.
Maybe Night Fear. That is a way, but if that was the way, Owen Colfer should have put that in, because I don't understand how... Like, it wasn't described that way, so it's like, it's a theory, but it's not canon.
Yeah. I like, wasn't even that worried about explaining stuff. Like, it happened. Don't ask me why.
So unless you guys have anything else to say on book 8, I'd kind of like to move on to what we think of the series as a whole. Do you guys have any more thoughts, comments, gripes?
I think we covered.
Yeah. Except for, I just wanted to say that I agreed with what you said in your summary thing. Not enough Juliet in this book. Like, the only Juliet in this book was, like, her holding underwear for, like, 2 minutes, and then she's just possessed by someone else the entire time, and it's like, what a cop-out. Like, oh, you have 2 female characters, and now that you haven't really had this character be a part of the books really very much since, like, book 3, and then a little bit in what book was that? Book 7, but that also had like an underwear scene at that same point with like the zombies and like what the F? And then now that we like finally have her in the book again, you feel like then it's like, oh wait, just kidding. Nope, she's just possessed the whole time and is not even a part of it. And it's like, just give Juliet some page time.
I just remembered Juliet being a lot more prominent. Like, she's one of my favorite characters, and I guess I just assumed that she showed up a lot because she stood out to me so much, but she's really not in the series as much as she should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like there was no conclusion for her in this book. Like, she was just kind of dropped. And I would have liked maybe obviously she wasn't one of Artemis's close friends, but I would have liked some commentary by her or something. Another thought for this. I am so happy that I will never have to read about how thick mulch is again. I am so tired of that. So tired of it. And that's my final thought on book 8.
Yeah, that whole mulch scene when he like comes and rescues them and is like glowing.
He describes it as globes.
I hated it.
Yeah. I was standing in Target. I was just like like I had the most like disturbed look on my face during that whole scene. I was like, oh gosh, what am I listening to?
Yeah, I feel like I'm reading something that was written like 2 to 3 years ago when every song was about like butts, and I was like, God, this is awful. So yeah, do you guys have anything else to say on book 8? Or okay, so we're gonna end that discussion with mulch and his thickness and go on to the series discussion. So what are your overall thoughts on the series as a whole? And maybe if you want to do it then when you first read the books versus now that we are all in our like early 20s reading them. So
Giselle, you can go first.
Okay. I think it's no surprise out of the 3 of this that I enjoyed it the least out of the 3 of us for sure. This was my first time reading this book in particular, although I had read the very ending, so like I knew about the whole like clone plot and everything, and that Artemis died and that blah blah blah, and that he like didn't have his full memories or whatever. That's like the only thing I knew about book 8. But besides that, I read the other 7 books, and I had always really enjoyed them in the past besides for book 5, but on this reread, it's like my ratings like steadily went down as I went through the series. I don't think I rated a book 4 stars past the first 3. I would have to double check, but like I'm pretty sure I didn't. I think I gave the first book 5 stars, the second book maybe like 3.5, the third book 4 or 4.5, and then I think 3 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, 1 star, or 1.5, and then like 2 stars. So, and honestly, I don't know if I would have pushed through if I was reading it on my own and not doing it as like a book discussion. I just feel like the first 3 books were a lot stronger, maybe because they weren't trying to be something that they weren't. They are a fun, engaging, quite clever middle grade series. And then when it starts moving beyond that and trying to get all these like crazy magic systems and convoluted time traveling and like all the stuff from like book 5 and on, I just feel like Colfer really lost it, and I just didn't really enjoy it beyond that point. And I feel like in rereads of the series in the future, I don't see myself ever reading beyond book 4 again. That I will probably just reread the first book. Maybe if I feel like it, I'll read all 4, but then I would never want to read further than that again, which is really, really sad because I remember when I read the 6th book for the first time, I absolutely adored it. And when I read the 7th book for the first time, I was like on a road trip with my mom and we listened to the 7th book together and we were like hysterically laughing the whole time. And we had actually like driven up to Utah from California and driving down, and we like were listening to the very end of the 7th book like in the car, and I'm the one that like got her into the series and she read the whole series with me. And like whenever we'd go on road trips, we'd listen to it. So then when the 7th book came out, we listened to it together, and like we got back to California and like we sat in the parking lot of the library because it was like due that day, and we sat and we like listened to the last like 15 minutes together in the parking lot, and then we went and returned it and went home and like got home from our trip, and we were able to unpack and stuff. And like I have these like super like fond nostalgic memories of like the books and how where I was in my life when I read them and how I felt, and that just like unfortunately was really lost for me this time around. That I don't know if it was the nostalgia that really saved like the first 4 books for me, if they're actually are really good, and I think that's probably what it is, that they actually are really good. But even though I did have nostalgia for like book 6 and book 7, like they just didn't live up. And I don't know, overall I feel pretty sad. Like if I was rating the series just for the first 4 books as a series, I'd probably give it like 4 stars. Like I think it's really good. But for all 8 books together, maybe like a 2-star, which is super sad because even though it had some really good parts, yeah, I overall didn't feel very happy or resolved with it. And I think it just tried to be a lot more than it bit off more than it could chew. So I don't know. And I just like Opal's really annoying, and the fact that she's like such a huge recurring character, and then having whatever his name was, Root, be like the villain in book 7, and it felt like totally out of left field. And it's like, why is this a thing? Yes, you were introduced in like a novella that most people haven't read, but like, why are you the villain in this one? And I just feel like the whole series wasn't like very coherent, which is fine if they're like fun little like standalone vignettes that like build on each other, which is what I feel like the first 4 was. But then in the last 4, when he almost tries to make it more of a cohesive storyline, I hated it. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I'm pretty disappointed, but I don't know. I feel like I am a very like harsh and critical reader as well. Like I do rate books very harshly, and I read so much that it's like you can see on my Goodreads, like my average rating is like a 3.2 or something. Like I rate books very harshly, so it's like I guess you have to take everything with like a grain of salt, that like I'm very, very critical, and I don't usually like let things slide. Like if I find something I don't like, I very much like glom to it and stick to it, and like can let it annoy me. Or like how like everything rhymes in English in these books, even though it's like gnomish like phrases and sayings, like, but it rhymes in English, and I'm like, why does it rhyme in English? This makes no sense. And like I let stuff irritate me. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. But like that's just kind of how the person I am. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry it was like the whole thing was a 2-star for you, like the whole series, but I do agree with you that the first like 4 are probably the strongest. Cara, did you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I can go next if you want.
I do want to say really quickly though, like the overall experience, like getting to like talk every month and everything though, like it is what kept me going, and it helped me be motivated. And this part has been so fun and like so worth it. This part has been like a 5-star experience. Like, this has been so fun, but the books just weren't like perfect for me, unfortunately.
Yeah,
you can go. Cara.
Yeah, like I actually did like a new ranking of the series, because I had ranked them before we reread them, or right after we started. And then I ranked them again. And the first 4 are still my favorites, which I kind of expected that to happen. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this at the beginning, but like this has always been one of my favorite series. And I I feel like I'm also a critical reviewer in general. But this series is one where the things I love about it are so important to me, and I think they're so well done. Like, I think the character development of this series is fantastic. Like, Artemis is one of the characters that I think is going to stick with me for my whole life. You know, like this is like a founding experience for me, as far as like realizing that I really like certain kinds of character arcs. Like Artemis and Edmund Pevensey, honestly, are like two of the characters that really helped me like realize that when I was younger. So I feel like for me, with books I love, despite being, I think, a very, what I hope is a critical and fair reviewer, there are two kinds of books I love where it's like, it's so good and it's hard for me to even find anything wrong with it. And then there's books where it's like, there are things wrong with it and I can talk about things I don't like about it, but the things I think are good are so strong that it outweighs that for me. Like we talked about, like with book 7, like I had a lot of personal reasons for loving that one. So in spite of the like weird plot and some of the stupid like character choices and stuff, like I still really enjoyed that book because it meant a lot to me. But I feel like overall this series is just, I do think it's good. Yeah, I mean, I think the later books, I don't think the consistency was very good. Like we talked about how it seems like Owen Colfer like just never reread his own books because he was like blatantly contradicting stuff, and that is annoying. But I love these characters so much, and the storylines mean a lot to me, and I feel like the thematic elements of these books are another thing that really keep me coming back to them. Like this idea of like not just Artemis's arc as a whole, but like this idea of like caring about people and how that can be like we see in book 7 how like that can lead somebody to do some really terrible things because he did everything, you know, because he loved his wife. But we also see how like letting people in can be really important and can be like what makes your life feel more full. I don't know. I don't want to get into like too much mushy stuff, but yeah, I just like, I really love these books. I mean, even I think this book is the lowest rating I've given, and it was a 2-star. And even book 5, which is my next least favorite, I think I gave that 3 or 3.5 stars because despite all the things I don't like about it, I think these books have a lot going for them. Like I anticipate I'm going to continue to reread these. And I mean, just talking about like Giselle was saying, like having like very clear memories of when you read these books. I remember reading The Last Guardian for the first time, like right when it came out. And I remember finishing it and just like laying there on my bed and like crying for like 20 minutes because it was over and because I was so like gutted by the ending. And the part that's like really shocking is I didn't read another book for like a couple days after that. And I never get book hangovers, like ever. I don't remember the last time that happened to me unless it was that book. So I just feel like that's kind of representative of how I feel about this series overall. I'm sorry, Giselle, you didn't enjoy it as much as you thought. I just really love it. And I don't know if it means that, I don't think it's that I have like a blind spot for this series. I think it's just one of those favorite series where it's not like, I'm not saying it's like a flawless masterpiece. I'm saying there's a lot of really good things and there's a lot of really bad things, but the good things mean more to me than the bad things do, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I feel overall.
For me, I feel like I land in the middle of you guys. And I think part of that is that I mean, I know you didn't finish the complete series, Giselle, but I stopped halfway through book 5. And I still hold that the first 4 are the best. And the first one especially, you know, I have a lot of fond feelings like towards it. It really inspired the way I write, the sort of stories I like. I love urban fantasy because of Artemis Fowl. And it was also my first bookish crush, as you guys all know. Butler will forever be with me. And I think I'm kind of the opposite in terms of how I rate books from you, Giselle, because one of the consequences of being an English major where you spend 4 years critically reading and dissecting everything is that you never want to do it again. So I am way too easy on books. I let so many things slide that I probably shouldn't. And I feel like that did help a little with my enjoyment in that so many stupid things happen in these books, but I was just like, I should probably care about this, but I can't, I don't have the energy to. Your goals though, Giselle, I would really like to be more critical in how I read. For me, I think the first four are always going to be very important to me and very special to me. Now, coming into the other 5 or 4 other books that I didn't read, I do say the quality kind of dipped, and part of that was Owen Colfer trying to attach all of these different magic systems while clearly not planning them out. I think I would have had a much more positive opinion of the last 4 if he had decided to make them more complex and expand the world and the magic system. If he had sat down and made it all cohesive and coherent and everything makes sense, because, you know, while I don't look like, I don't think too much on I still don't understand the magic system, but while I don't think too much on the weird plot inconsistencies, the whole ghosts have always existed, and you just need a ghost and a clone to cure death, I guess. That I don't particularly appreciate. But overall, I enjoyed the characters, and I think the characters really make it for me. The characters, the stories are interesting, and the first 4 are really good adventure books for kids, and it's something that I'm hoping to pass on when I have children. I would say overall, with the series, I'd give it maybe a 3.5 star. The first 4 are probably like 4 and 5 stars for me. The last 4, I think, were under 4, but overall 3.5 stars for the entire series. And also, I really like doing this. I liked having people to discuss these books with, and I do like that we all come with different opinions about things or different ways of looking at things. So that was really fun to sort of do.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think we talked about this in one of the earlier books, but I think the thematic material these books cover, I think those are, remain consistently strong. Like when Giselle was saying that he bit off more than he could chew, I think with the plot elements, yes, but as far as the overall meaning of the story, I think it remains pretty, I don't know, pretty solidly I guess mature, or I don't know if mature is the right word, but that's just something I've been thinking about. And we talked about Artemis's character arc and where he ultimately ends up. And I think those things are they're audacious, I guess you could say, but I think he managed to reach that. I think where he fell short in the quality of the books was plotting, rather than he took on too much by trying to make these fun and happy kids books mean something, I don't know. I think they do matter beyond just being fun adventure stories, but
yeah, they're good books though, and I honestly recommend at least the first 4 to anyone who wants a nice fun adventure with interesting and funny characters, and for the most part, a good sense of humor.
Yeah, just ignore everything about mulch, and they're pretty funny.
Yeah,
and honestly, such a cool magic system. Even just in the first 4, I had never, I don't know, this is a surprise to no one. I was really snobby as a kid. Still pretty snobby now, but I was so snobby as a kid, and I wouldn't give anything a chance, and I was so judgmental and awful. I hope that I've grown a little bit, but I don't know. But I was and this was one of the series and one of the books that really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, because it's not anything I'd ever read before, that it was modern with fairies, and there was technology and all these different species and all this different stuff is not anything I had ever seen before. And I still feel even with all the over 1,000 books that I've read at this point, they're still very unique. and the idea of them are, again, not like really anything that I've ever read. I can't think of anything that's very similar to these series at all. And that's really incredible. And that, I think that really helped push me as a younger kid to be willing and open to trying more things, which I think has helped improve my character a lot and has made me less judgmental and snobby, hopefully. But like, I remember when I first started, I'm like, what is this? This is like, and I was like so like purist, I guess, with like a certain type of like what fantasy is, and this doesn't fall into what my ideas of fantasy were, which is really cool.
I mean, this is one of the first science fiction-esque series I read, and I think I only read it because I didn't know it was science fiction, because I was in this phase of like, I hated all sci-fi and like I would refuse to try new stuff, kind of like Giselle was saying. Like, I was pretty sure about what things I liked, and science fiction was not one of them. So I feel like this series is really good to like kind of bridge those, like especially with sci-fi and fantasy, but with other genres too. I think it's like Giselle was saying, like I think it is very unique. Yeah, there's not a lot I can think of that's really feels similar to me.
And it could even like get people who only like reading contemporaries into fantasy as well, because it's like, again, set like in a modern world, and there's a lot of like technology and stuff, and very engaging characters. And yeah, like I never would have read the series except for my brother. We like traded book series, and he gave me a book series to read, I gave him a book series to read, and we like did a little swap or whatever, and that's the only reason I read it. And I like didn't, I don't know if I mentioned this, I did not like this book when I read it when I was a kid, the first time I read it. I read it when I was 12, and I was like, man, this isn't like anything I've ever read before, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason, I read book 2, and I didn't like book 2 either. But for some reason, I guess just because I was at the library and they had the next book, then I picked it up, and then I read book 3 and I fell in love with it, plowed through the whole series, and then went back and reread them and really loved them and got into it. But like, I didn't even like it the first time I read it because I was such a little snob. So, anyway.
So
Baku would make the perfect butler. Did you see that, Taylor?
Yes. Thank you so much. I finally someone agrees with me. I am totally down with them making Butler black, but he needs to be hot. And so I immediately turned to the Black Panther cast because there is a wide variety. And I went with M'Baku because he is large and handsome.
The two requirements for
That's all I need. I don't even know if he can play the part correctly, but that's what I want.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. Someone said Idris Elba, and I like Idris Elba. I think he's very handsome, but I'm not going for suave with Butler. I need him to be able to kill anyone. Like, I need to know he can take someone out, and I don't know if I get that from Idris Elba, even though he is very handsome. So I wanted to ask you guys favorite book and favorite character. And we can also talk, or actually, what do you think about Artemis's development throughout the book? Let's go with the deep one, and then we can get into the rapid fire ones. Do any of you guys want to go first, or I can go, or?
Yeah, you should go, Taylor.
Okay. I loved it. Like, it got a bit inconsistent, a little bit in the middle and near the end, but for the most part, I think, especially when I was a kid reading the first 4 books, I really liked. This was the first book I ever read where a character who was the villain came to sort of become the hero. And it was very intriguing for me how he could redeem himself after kidnapping a woman, holding her hostage, putting a bunch of lives at stake, little things like that. And even now, when I was finishing the book, thinking about where he started as this cold, ruthless, heartless little boy who hated whaling for some okay. Hated whaling. Kidnapping a woman, fine. Whaling, that's too far.
Yeah.
But you know, this very sinister and self-centered kid turned into this like guy who's willing to sacrifice himself, not just for the greater good of humanity, for a friend, but for the person he, you know, who he kidnapped in the first book, and seeing their friendship grow and develop and seeing him become a better person through his interactions with Holly and the fairies and so on. I loved it. And that's probably one of the best parts of the whole series for me, is seeing how far he's come.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. That's the tea.
I feel pretty similarly. And I kind of already talked about this when I was talking about why I love the series and like why I keep coming back to it. Yeah, Artemis, I think like you, Taylor, this was one of the first times, him and Edmund Pevensey, this is one of the first times where a main character starts out as a villain and you really see them grow substantially over a long series. And that, I really liked that. I really liked this idea that people can change and people can get better, but they have to want to be. Like, that's something else that I felt really impressed with, is this book never, I don't feel like this series really tries to make it like, oh, it wasn't his fault, you know, he didn't have love when he was a kid. It's like he was bad and he did terrible things. And it did take spending time with people who were good and who cared about him, but he also had to make his own decision about what kind of person he wanted to be. And I really liked that. I really like that it's not like he becomes a good guy and suddenly all his problems are solved. Like, he has several moments where he's realizing like, man, this whole caring about people thing, that's a lot. Like, this makes everything so much more difficult. So I kind of appreciated that it's not like this like open and shut, like, oh, now he's a good guy and everything's simple. Is like, in a lot of ways it complicates his life, but for the better. And I talked about last discussion, I talked about how much I appreciated seeing him struggle with something that was kind of like OCD. So seeing him have setbacks, I think was also important, that he would have to like, you know, work to handle. Yeah, I really love his character arc. And like we were saying, like, I think having that in mind is one of the things that made this book so powerful for me, despite not liking a lot of the plot stuff, is just thinking about that contrast and that person who's like book one Artemis, who would be willing to blow up, you know, a ship that had people on it, you know, to doing what he did in this one, which is not only risking or giving up his life to save the person that he kidnapped, that he didn't even treat like a human, like a person, but also the fact that he was willing to die for all of these people that he had never met, you know, like becoming such a like selfless person, but in a way that still had, like, he still has that like criminal mastermind edge to him. Like, we see a couple times he's like, well, I mean, there's still people that deserve to be stolen from. And I kind of like that. I like that he became a good guy, but he didn't become boring, you know, like he still has his own personality. And yeah, I really love his arc. This was kind of like the standard for me as far as character development goes. Because like, I didn't see Avatar: The Last Airbender until like a year ago. So I know a lot of people, yeah, I know, but I loved it, but I didn't see it until like a year ago. So I know a lot of people, like, their kind of standard for character growth was Zuko. Artemis was my Zuko. Like, that was like the standard of how to write a really good character arc. So yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Giselle?
I feel like you guys have said it all, but yeah, I don't know. Like, again, like, I am like very much a nitpicker, and definitely a lot of the stuff that I feel like happens with Artemis, like, and a lot of the lines that he says and stuff is like very like campy, like very ridiculous and melodramatic and like all this stuff that's like a little like roll your eyes at it. But like overall, like, again, like, and like especially for like a series directed towards like younger readers, that's like really important to show that like you can change and you can grow and not everything is black and white and set in stone. And it's like I love the Redwall books a lot, and I really love Brian Jakes, but like his books are very black and white, and like you're either good or you're bad, and it's like very much like how you're born, and it's like not a good message to to children, and it's just like I do really enjoy that, and I still remember like, especially like the first time I ever read like the series, like that like plot twist almost that like they erase his memories and he kind of starts over from like page 1 in book 4, and it's like total like personality change, and he has to like get over that again and stuff. Like I just like remember absolutely loving that, and I still think it's like really cool and very interesting, and yeah, but everything else you guys said as well.
And super quick final thoughts before we sign off on our Artemis Fowl read along. Favorite book, favorite character. I can go first.
Go first, Taylor.
I think you guys all know who my favorite character is.
Yeah.
It's Butler. For those of you who haven't been along since the very beginning, or for some reason missed every single time I talked about Butler, I have a huge crush on him. He was my first ever bookish crush, and I don't know how that happened. I was reading the book as like a young preteen for the first time, and they mentioned how muscular he was, and I was like, oh, I love him. And it's been that way ever since. So he's by far my favorite character, but don't worry, I'm not completely shallow. I like how much he cares for Artemis. I like the sort of father-son relationship they have, considering the fact that, you know, even before Artemis Fowl's dad went missing, Artemis has seen more of Butler than he has of his own parents. And I do really like that relationship dynamic. I like Butler and Holly's friendship too. I just love my boys so much. And my favorite book is always going to be the first book. I think it's a brilliant opening to a series. And I think it introduced a lot of elements that I hadn't seen in books up until then. You know, you're mixing heist, urban fantasy, science fiction, you know, comedy, kind of. You're mixing all of these elements, and I think it comes out pretty seamlessly. So that'll always be my favorite book.
Giselle, do you want to go next?
Sorry, Book Cave just wrote, LOL, Taylor, the thirst is real. I can't believe I'm getting called out like this.
I mean,
yeah, I'm not subtle.
It's right out for everyone to see. Do you want to go, Giselle, or?
Yeah, I can go. Again, I would agree that the first book is my favorite. It's the only one I gave 5 stars. And now I'm like really curious, now that I've like read the entire series, it's fresh in my mind, if I like went back and read the first book, if it would still be a 5-star. But like I feel like it would, because it's just like, again, it's like a really strong opening to the series, and it's just like so fun to get like introduced to the characters and the world, and everything's so like fresh and exciting, and yeah, it's a great book. And then as far as favorite character, honestly, I don't have one. I really like all the characters, and I like them all for different reasons, and I like different aspects about them, and I like different characters at different times for different reasons and different scenes and all the stuff. So like I'm not sure if I could pick one. I don't know. I really love Juliet. I just wish she was in there more. And yeah. I really love Mulch a lot. Like, he is one of my favorite characters, and I love him and like Foley together. I think they're great. But again, I think it just goes along with like Owen Colfer's like inconsistencies, that like even characters that I really love, he makes them be out of character a lot of the time. So I'm always like, I feel like it's always like a little bit tainted, that like some of the things they do or say, I'm just like, this is not okay. Like how like Foley, I'm like, oh, I really love Foley, except for, you know, at the time that he's like, let's just leave Artemis dead. It's fine. We don't need him. Like, I'm like, what the hell, Foley? Like, so it's like, I really love Foley, but like, oh, he did this thing. So like, can he be my favorite because he did that? Like, so anyway, I really love, honestly, all the characters. I really, truly do. All the good guys, at least, and such a good group dynamic
Yeah.
like super enjoyable.
Yeah.
I
love their interactions too, and I have a lot of characters.
Keep talking super quickly. I can still hear you. I just need to grab my charger because my battery is running dangerously low.
Okay.
I can hear you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I love the group dynamic too, and I love a lot of the characters, and I think a lot of them are close, but I think I do have to go with Artemis as being my favorite because of his development and because like I'm very, very hard to please when it comes to main characters. I almost always like side characters more than the protagonist. I'm very picky about it. So the fact that I love Artemis so much, even when we have so many great supporting characters, I think that says a lot. So that's another reason that he's my favorite. I just love his whole arc, his whole like journey. I think he's a great like he's kind of funny too, but he doesn't always try to be. But yeah, like I love Holly, I love Juliet, I love a lot of the supporting characters, but I think just for sheer like emotional connection, which is a big thing for books with me, I have to go with Artemis. And my favorite book is actually this is an unpopular opinion, I guess, but mine's the Arctic Incident. I love that one. And I love book 1 too. That's actually my second favorite. And those two are like pretty close. But I love the Arctic Incident because it's the first time we get to see the gang together and they're working on the same side and they kind of hate it, but they are. And I just remember a lot of the little moments in that book, like very clearly, like the whole like getting onto the train sequence is like vividly in my mind. I just think that's a really strong book because we start seeing a lot of the character dynamics that I really enjoy later on. Yeah, it's the first book where Artemis is like, maybe I could be like a normal person and have friends, and like it's just very heartwarming. Also, I want to point out the like massive spoiler that is on the cover for the 8th book in like the new redesign. Did you guys see that?
No, I can't see it.
It's like dead Artemis in a field.
What?
I just wanted to show you that because that has been pissing me off since those covers were released. I was like, how do you put that on the cover? Like, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
So yeah, unless you guys have any final thoughts or comments or anything, we can wrap up.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
So we did talk about this, and we really have enjoyed doing this like very long like book club reading discussion thing for like a whole series, like especially like middle grade. We all really love middle grade and think it's great. So we were talking about like if we wanted to do another series, and we decided yes, but I was kind of like a snob and was like, it has to be a short series so it can like finish with by the end of the year and like not be another like 8-book long series. And then like who knows what will happen next year? Maybe we can start a really long series then. So we're going to be actually doing discussions monthly through the end of the year for some Gail Carson Levine. So we're going to do Ella Enchanted being like the first book in the like Enchanted series, and then Fairest being the second book, and then Ogre Enchanted being the third book, which actually just came out I think last year. And
It is a prequel though.
Oh, it's a prequel.
Yeah.
And then Fairest is a companion to Ella Enchanted. So Ella Enchanted, Fairest is the companion, and Ogre Enchanted I don't think is like a retelling of a specific fairy tale, although the other two are.
Yeah.
And Cara's already read Ogre Enchanted, but she'll still discuss it with us. And I haven't read it, and I'm very worried too because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna hate it. But
Giselle, why do you keep reading books you don't like?
I think I don't know. I just like I think the title just really bothers me. It's such a lazy title that like pretty sure I won't like it. Just going off of that, like, ugh, Ogre Enchanted, what a lazy name. But I think Ella Enchanted and Fairest are absolutely brilliant. So I'm really excited to read those. Yeah, so we're gonna do that, and I think we're gonna discuss like at the end of this month, the next, and then maybe like the first week of January or something for like the 3. Like after the holidays, we might like push that one off a bit. But anyway, so Ella Enchanted, I guess we'll still do the first week of October, or like the last week of September. Do we do the 29th of September, maybe?
I
That is a short book.
a live show the 29th.
So maybe the 6th?
The 6th.
The 6th might work better for me.
6th of October. So that will be our tentative date. You can always follow us on Twitter. Maybe Cara or Taylor, because I don't really ever tweet, but follow them.
And I might have to make another Twitter because now we're no longer the Artemis Fowl read along.
I know. Yeah. Well, like, kind of like, I don't want to delete this one because now it's like
now it's there.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, we'll figure out the logistics of it. And
we'll keep you updated on our Twitters.
Yeah. And obviously there's like no obligation to join in. You guys can just tune in for like your favorite book of the 3, but like we've just really enjoyed discussing with each other and with you guys, and we're having a lot of fun. So this is just our way of like continuing that. Yeah. And also I know that like literally everyone and their sister has like a read along group. So I understand if you already like busy, but we're going to be here. And if you want to join us, that would be fun.
But it's middle grade, so it's really not a huge obligation.
It's true. It's
really short.
Yeah. It's interesting when people say that though, because for me, like enjoyment is a much better determining factor than like if something's a middle grade or like an adult or a young adult. Like there's no consistency, or is consistency the word I'm looking for? Like basically it doesn't matter like what the age is. It's like if I'm loving a book, I can like power through it. But there have been middle grade books that took me like 3 weeks to get through because I didn't like it.
These ones are all really short, though. I think I think they're all under 350 pages, and the Ella Enchanted's only like 250 maybe. Like
it's short, yeah.
It's really short, so
yeah.
And
thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I said, and a very fast read. So
yeah. It is.
And I have like an hour almost long review, I think, of Ella Enchanted on my channel somewhere. It's
really?
Like it's over half an hour, I'm pretty sure. So if you want to go watch my very lengthy review, you always can. Self-promotion.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, guys. And we obviously follow us on social media so that you can stay updated on what's going on with next month, or if there are any updates in general. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've had so much fun. Thank you for
It's been a great year. Bye.